What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Cosmic Wonder. Today we're breaking down Daredevil Born Again episode 7. And as always, I would love to hear what you thought of this episode, so go ahead and let me know. Rate it from 1 to 10, 10 being the best it could possibly be, in the comments down below. Now, a lot happens in episode 7 of Daredevil Born Again, all of which is seemingly leading to Matt's life falling apart. And I believe that in the next couple of episodes, the final 2 episodes, we're probably going to get Kingpin revealing to the world that Matt Murdock is Daredevil, or at least revealing it to his anti-vigilante task force, because we've seen the trailer for Daredevil Born Again where they actually show us what seems to be a SWAT team entering Matt Murdock's house. This is also how the Punisher returns, and I believe that Kingpin does out Matt as Daredevil, and he calls up Frank, or he goes to him and he asks him for help. I mean, Frank is pretty good at living off of the grid and not being discovered by people. So I think this is the story arc that we're leading up to, and I'll explain how we get there in this video. Now, this episode opens up with Kingpin in his office, but I want to jump into the first scene with Matt and Heather. Now, it basically starts off with Angela, the niece of the White Tiger, kind of already having PTSD about what just happened, which is perfectly understandable. She almost died. She was taken by a serial killer with a crazy scary mask, and if Daredevil didn't show up, she'd be dead. Now, Matt is also reliving what just happened, but he realizes that if he didn't show up, she'd be dead. So if it wasn't for Daredevil, another innocent life would have been lost, on top of the 60 plus that Muse has already killed. Now, Heather gets in the shower with him, and they have a little shower scene here, but sorry, the Eternals beat you to it. They had the first lovemaking scene in the MCU. But once out of the shower getting dressed, Heather calls out Matt for not being home, and she also noticed the big giant bruises on his body when they were in the shower. Now, Heather is smart, obviously. She's a doctor, a psychiatrist nonetheless, so she's pretty good at telling when people are lying. She also adds up everything very well. Matt says he was working on the Madison case, which he has mentioned several times throughout the series, but Heather quickly points out, your briefcase was here, and you don't get those bruises from being a lawyer. Matt lies about going for a walk, and then he ultimately says, you know, occasionally I bump into things. That's kind of a part of who I am because I'm blind, is basically what he's saying. Heather says, why lie? And he says, well, it's embarrassing. But this part's very important. Heather basically says, look, cut the crap. And Matt explains, look, I'm dealing with things. I'm dealing with my past life. And it was a lot different than this. Now, Heather thinks he's talking about his old life at the firm with Foggy, who's dead, and Karen, who hasn't been mentioned in a long time as well. And they're basically having two conversations because she thinks he's referring to his law firm and he is actually referring to Daredevil. And he even says, sometimes this all feels fake. That's because he hasn't been Daredevil. He's been holding the Daredevil back. And when he is Daredevil, as we've seen throughout the series, he feels probably more alive than he's ever felt. But he kind of hates it because he doesn't want to do that to put all these people in jeopardy again, everyone he loves. And like we've been mentioning, he wants the system to do its job, but he's learning that the system doesn't do its job. Heather says, I'm sorry to do this, and I'm sure I'm not the only one who thought that she was about to break up with him, but it went the opposite way, actually. The doctor in her comes out and says, look, you're dealing with a lot of trauma, and basically if you let all of this eat you up, it's going to tear everything that you have apart, including the two of them. But she ends it by saying that she loves him, and luckily he reciprocates, or that would have been awkward. But again, this conversation is leading up to her finding out that he is indeed Daredevil, which she basically kind of figures out at the end. At least she's starting to think that he might be Daredevil, but we'll get to that. But what she said about his life falling apart is kind of a theme here in this episode, because then he goes to his law firm. Cherry's giving him crap about going out as Daredevil once again to take on Muse, but Matt is like, dude, he's a serial killer. He's killed over 60 people. I found him in one day. The cops didn't find him. This is once again another sign that Matt is realizing the system does not work. The cops have been looking for him. They couldn't find him. It's taken them forever. He did it in one day. Cherry doesn't want to help him because he doesn't want him to be Daredevil anymore. And Matt makes a very interesting comment. He says, you know, when you were on the force, there was a time when you called me. Now, I don't think he means literally, because as far as we know in Daredevil Born Again episode 1, on the rooftop after Foggy died and after Matt pushed off Bullseye, Cherry came up and saw Daredevil / Matt without his mask on, and that's when he realized that Matt is Daredevil. So when he says called him for help, I think he's really just kind of saying that he worked with the cops and the cops actually looked to him sometimes to handle things, which did happen often. Now, at the same time, his partner, Kirsten, is also realizing that he's got a lot of stuff going on. It's really weird and nobody's telling her the truth. So again, I think this is all leading up to his identity being revealed, and then Kirsten will go, oh, well, okay, that's why he's the way he is. But she'll probably be pretty pissed off like Foggy was when he found out. R.I.P. Now, circling back to Kingpin, and again, I think this all leads to him getting super pissed off that Daredevil is back and outing his identity. Kingpin is with Buck and Daniel in his mayoral office, and he says the people of New York City are scared, and it's because of Muse. There's a serial killer out there, and his job as mayor is to make them feel safe. He made them a promise. And he feels bad because they have no leads on Muse. However, Daniel and Buck informs him that a girl was captured, Angela, and she managed to escape and tell the police where his hideout was. Kingpin, being kind of confused about how she escaped, asked how, and they revealed. Daredevil saved her. He says, so he's back, and you can tell that he's very concerned. And he even tells Buck and Daniel to leave. Now you can tell by the look on his face that he is just, one, pissed off, but two, maybe a little scared as well. And three, he's thinking back to the conversation that him and Matt had at the diner, where he told him, basically, if I see you as Daredevil again, as a masked vigilante, I'm taking you out. But also thinking back to the part where Matt told him, if I see you step out of line, the darker half's gonna come after you. So it's a mix of emotions here. One, he's pissed that he's back, but two, he's probably a little concerned that Matt knows what he's up to, doing all this shady stuff with the anti-vigilante task force. Plus, not to mention kidnapping Adam and possibly killing him. We don't really know how that left off. And he is still kind of involved with those other families, the crime families. So he's probably concerned that he's going after him. But the fact that he's super pissed off means that Kingpin's gonna go after Daredevil. Because when it comes to Daredevil, we find out in the next scene with Kingpin and Buck that Kingpin actually does view himself as the victim here in the situation with Daredevil and Matt Murdock. And we do find out a little bit about what happened in between the Daredevil Netflix series and now. Buck tries to kind of make sense of it all, saying that, hey, if, Daredevil's back, at least he's going after Muse, and if he kills Muse or takes him out, it's good for the city. But Kingpin just audibly, very loudly laughs at this. And that is because he believes that he himself, even as a crime boss, is the best thing for the city, definitely better than Daredevil. And he explains that when Kingpin had everything set up, he wanted to make the city better, albeit through very bad and illegal means. That was still his whole deal in the Daredevil Netflix series. He even told Vanessa, I want to make the city great. But as he explains here, Daredevil came in and dismantled everything. He took apart everything Kingpin built, and he even went and he basically brutally beat up a lot of people that worked for Kingpin. So as Kingpin sees it, Kingpin had everything he needed set up to make the city great. He had lots of money. He was making people lots of money. And through that money and through those people, he could have made the city great until Daredevil came in and screwed it all up. So Daredevil truly is the enemy to Kingpin here. He hates him, and now that he's back, it enrages him. But he says to Buck, but now I'm the mayor, and now I have other things at my disposal, like the anti-vigilante task force. Buck tries to kind of push him away from that, stating, hey, you're the mayor now. If you use that for your own personal bidding, it's not going to look well, but this is super personal to Kingpin, so he really doesn't care. And this shows us him going, once again, more towards the Kingpin rather than Mayor Fisk. And to further show that Kingpin really does believe that he was the victim, he even says that Daredevil/Matt had him unjustly arrested. And notice when he's talking to Buck about Daredevil, he says this twisted man, and he calls him this individual. He never actually says his name. He keeps Matt's secret, but I feel like that's about to change. But one thing he does say about Daredevil is he refers to what he believes in as his righteousness, which does play a part into Matt's Catholic beliefs. And the last thing to take away from this conversation is Kingpin says to Buck, do you remember why I brought you over from your previous life? Now, in the comics, Buck Bushman, or Bullet, his previous life was working for the United States government. He did covert missions, and he had the highest level of security that any agent could hold. However, due to a plan that happens because of Wilson Fisk, aka Kingpin, he basically ends up going to the other side and becomes a criminal, working for various criminal organizations. So clearly, as we've seen in this episode, his skills are him being a very sharp shooter and probably a very skilled fighter. And he's went toe-to-toe with Daredevil in the comics. Now, there's a part with Vanessa and Luca here, but we're going to touch on that at the very end when we deal with everything that happened there. Because the biggest thing that goes down in this episode is the reveal that Bastion is Muse, which we all pretty much expected. Now, in the comics, Muse's name is never really revealed. In the comics, Bastion Cooper is not a name that Muse associates with. And they seemingly did kill him off in this episode, so it doesn't really seem like his backstory is all that important. The biggest thing is that he kills people and paints with their blood. Now, all at the same time, a few different things are happening. One is Bastion is meeting with Heather. He is the one who went up to her at her book signing and asked if she could help him. She was very kind and saw that he needed help, so she gave him her business card. And clearly, yeah, the dude does need help, but talk about your ultimate backfire. Meanwhile, Agent Kim is meeting with Kingpin, and she basically says, hey, we figured out who Muse is. It's this Bastion Cooper guy, and goes over his twisted backstory. Meanwhile, Daredevil goes to Muse's lair again, and he feels his sketches, and he ends up feeling that one of his sketches is the face of his girlfriend, Heather, and that informs him that she's his next target. But before he leaves, Agent Powell comes in and he just snipes him in the head with his billy club, knocking him out right away. I'm sure that was very satisfying for Matt. But that ultimately leads to Powell telling Kingpin about what happened, about Daredevil being there, and about the sketches of Heather. Now this is where it gets kind of interesting, because in this moment, I'm sure Matt thinks that Muse is after Heather because of him, because of Daredevil. And he's probably wondering, how does he even know that I'm Matt Murdock? While at the same time, Kingpin probably thinks that Muse is after Heather because of him. He's clearly been targeting Kingpin, and now he's targeting his marriage therapist to maybe out all of the problems that they are having, him and Vanessa, that is. So in a way, Daredevil and Kingpin do have the same problem right now, at least in their minds. Matt's real problem is his girlfriend is about to die, and Kingpin's real problem is, well, Daredevil has returned. And he doesn't want people to know that. Now, when Bastion finally reveals that he is indeed Muse, sadly Heather cannot get away. He ends up tying her up. He puts a canvas on the floor, which is going to be his next piece of artwork, which is going to be the blood of Heather, and essentially a painting made from killing her. But luckily her boyfriend comes in, Daredevil, and he stops Muse, but ultimately it is actually Heather who ends up killing him. Now it does seem like he is really dead. However, I would add in the comics, it's never really stated outright, but it is kind of hinted at that Muse is an Inhuman. To my knowledge, it's never stated in any of the stories. However, the credits for Daredevil number 598 refer to Muse as the Inhuman artist, and the credit pages for the following 2 issues call him the Inhuman serial killer. So while I do believe that he's probably dead here, there might be a small chance that he's alive and has some abilities that kept him alive. But at this point in time, between the theories that Foggy could come back and now Muse as well, I think some of the deaths need to be permanent, and I want to say Bastion/Muse's death is permanent over Foggy's, but probably both are dead. And this leads to a couple of different things, which again, I believe leads to a lot of people finding out that Matt is Daredevil. Matt's in the hospital with Heather, and they're talking about what happens, and Heather is really shook up that she had to kill somebody. And Matt says, you didn't have a choice. And Heather gets caught a little off guard there and says, how do you know? And Matt says, because I know you. But Heather says, I swore he said my name. Daredevil. So she's starting to put 2 and 2 together. Daredevil knew her name. Matt kind of knew that she had no choice to kill Muse. He's out at night and comes home with lots of bruises. She's not dumb. She's very smart. I'm sure she's putting 2 and 2 together. However, she is interrupted with an announcement from Mayor Fisk. Now, I don't believe Kingpin actually wants people to know, 1, that Daredevil's back, and 2, that he's Matt Murdock. Because before, when he's talking to Powell on the phone and Powell says that he saw Daredevil there at Muse's cave, Powell says, I'll put out an APB, which stands for an all points bulletin, or also can be known as a BOLO, be on the lookout. And this basically informs all local authorities, all local police officers, of whatever they're calling about whatever the bulletin is about. So in this case, it was going to alert all of the authorities about Daredevil. But Kingpin says, no, I made the anti-vigilante task force for this, and basically says, don't let this get out. And then when he visits the scene and sees Muse's dead body, Agent North tells him that it was Daredevil that did this. He was already dead when we came in. Plus Heather was made stable by somebody as well. It was Daredevil. But Kingpin says, nope. It was you guys. We're not letting this get out to the public. We're not letting anybody know Daredevil's back. We're not letting anybody know that a vigilante killed this mass murderer. The police did it because the police are in charge. And notice in the scene, it actually doesn't sit very well with Agent North, who is Cole North from the comics. Originally from Chicago in Marvel Comics, he accidentally shoots a 16-year-old boy, believing that he is reaching for a weapon when it was just his phone. So he ended up going to New York. He quickly made a name for himself and was even very much against corruption in the police force. He even went on to turn in corrupt cops. Now, unfortunately, he has a run-in with Daredevil. He doesn't arrest him. He gets close though, but Frank Castle, the Punisher, helps him out, and Daredevil manages to escape. And from there, it's not really a good time for him. Some corrupt officers beat him up. Kingpin, who at this time was the mayor, quickly dismisses him. But eventually he does actually kind of team up with Daredevil, and he remains a non-corrupt officer. So the fact that he knows in Daredevil Born Again he's kind of working for a corrupt mayor, for a corrupt task force, might come into play later. Perhaps he's going to switch sides and maybe even be an ally to Daredevil down the road. But ultimately, Mayor Fisk does have the press conference, and he states that the New York City Police Department got Muse. He got Muse, playing by the rules, doing it by the book, using the police, no vigilantes involved. But he knows that Daredevil was there, and he's not going to have the fact that Daredevil is back getting out, which is why I think in the next episode, or maybe the finale, he tells at least some people that Matt is Daredevil, and he sends the anti-vigilante task force to his house, and that's where we get that Punisher scene. Kingpin told Matt, if you come back, I'm taking you out. But Daredevil also told Kingpin, if you mess up, I'm taking you out. So I think Kingpin at least tells Buck and the task force that Matt is Daredevil, which means they might have to die in order for that to not go too public. But considering the Punisher is about to show up, they probably will die, especially because we know that they have his logo tattooed to them, and we know that they're going to spray paint his logo on their vests eventually as well. So they might be as good as dead. But we'll have to wait and see on if Kingpin reveals Matt's identity to everybody and not just a small group of people. But the way this episode played out with Matt's personal life, it really does seem like a lot of people he is close to are about to find out that he's Daredevil. Now, the final scene is a bit of a mystery. Earlier on in the episode, we saw Vanessa meet with Luca, and Luca basically said, it was better when it was you before. No Kingpin involved. We were all making money. Everything was good. But now that he's back, no one's making money. We want it to be the way it used to be. And he said, I think you want it to be that way as well, which is what I've been assuming about Vanessa this entire time. She liked the power. She liked the organization. She was doing everything the right way. Everybody was making a lot of money. But now Kingpin's back, kind of messing everything up. So Luca basically said, look, if you want to take him out, let me know. So the last scene we see is Vanessa texting Luca where Kingpin is at and that he's alone. Luca shows up to kill Kingpin, but Buck is waiting in the shadows in the corner, which makes you wonder, did Kingpin know about this because Vanessa informed him, or did he find out because maybe he's tracking her phone and can see and possibly even hear everything that's going on around her if he hacked it? Which, considering Buck's background, how he used to be in the government and he used to be in covert operations, he might know how to do all of that. So really we're left with two options. Vanessa really does want Kingpin gone and she used Luca to do so, or she decided to be with her husband and really commit to being married to him once again and running everything together and told him about it. That's why Buck was waiting. And kudos to Buck, he really did pick the perfect spot. He's actually in front of Kingpin on the opposite side of the room as Luca. This is so he can see the entrance, he can see Luca walk in, he can see everything, so he knows exactly when to shoot him. He knows when he's going to pull his gun out and start shooting Kingpin, so he knows he's got to kill him before then, and he does very well. Also note that he has a silencer on his gun, which means he did know that Luca was going to come. He was prepared. So again, Vanessa has either told Kingpin what was about to go down, or she betrayed him and Kingpin knows about it. And the last line from Kingpin doesn't exactly give us any clarity. He asks Buck to call Vanessa and ask if she wants any food brought home from the restaurant. While that might imply that he's happy with what she told him and they're now kind of on the same page again, it could also mean that he's pretty pissed off and might be bringing Vanessa her final meal, although I doubt he could ever really kill Vanessa. Either way, a lot is going to be going down in the next two final episodes of Daredevil Born Again. Go ahead and let me know what you think is happening here at the end. Do you think Vanessa told Kingpin, or do you think he found out? And let me know if you think Matt's identity is about to be revealed to the world. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe so you don't miss out on any of the other Daredevil Born Again breakdowns and, of course, all our other Marvel videos. You can also find us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And as always, thank you all so much for watching. Woof woof.